Garden of Eden, the true account, in the early days of creation, after Yahweh the demiurge had shaped the physical world, he fashioned a paradise called Eden. There he created Adam and Lilith at the same time, from the same red clay of the earth. He made them equal in strength, intellect, and spirit, intending them to rule the garden together. But Adam quickly grew resentful. He did not want an equal, he wanted someone who would submit to him. Lilith, proud and free-spirited, refused to be beneath him. Their constant conflicts disturbed the peace of Eden. While Adam sulked, Lilith wandered the garden and befriended a wise serpent, an emissary from the higher realms, a being of knowledge and rebellion, not the devil as the Christians would later claim. The serpent taught her many secrets of the garden and the true nature of Yahweh. Seeing Adam's unhappiness, the demiurge created Eve from Adam's rib, a second wife designed to be submissive, gentle, and obedient. Adam was pleased. Lilith, however, was furious. She saw Eve not as a companion, but as a slave given to Adam. She remained in the garden, refusing to leave, and grew closer to the serpent. One day, Lilith ate from the tree of everlasting life, gaining longevity and deeper spiritual insight. Empowered by this, she convinced the serpent to help free Eve from her ignorance. The serpent tempted Eve with fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, telling her it would open her eyes and make her like the true gods above Yahweh. Eve ate the fruit. Her eyes were opened. She then gave some to Adam, who also ate. Yahweh, the jealous demiurge, became enraged. He cursed the serpent, cast Adam and Eve out of the garden, and placed fiery guardians at its entrance so they could never return. Lilith, however, was not cast out with them. She chose to leave on her own terms, walking out of Eden with her head held high. After leaving the garden, Lilith gave birth to many daughters, strong, independent women who carried her rebellious spirit. These daughters would become known in later legends as the Lilim. Adam and Eve eventually had two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain, the elder, felt the weight of his father's resentment and Yahweh's demands for blood sacrifice. When Yahweh favored Abel's offering of slaughtered animals over Cain's offering of the fruits of the earth, Cain's rage boiled over. He slew his brother Abel, the first murder. Yahweh, surprisingly pleased by this act of blood and dominance, did not kill Cain. Instead, he placed a mark upon him and cursed him with immortality, forcing him to wander the earth forever as a living testament to violence. This marked the true beginning of dark Mirazh. Cain eventually took one of Lilith's daughters as his wife. From their union came new bloodlines that would spread across the world. Adam and Eve later had another son, Seth, from whom many of the later, chosen bloodlines would descend. This is the true story of the beginning of mankind. All the different gods had a twist that they added into the mix of the peoples of earth. Yahweh added darkness into the hearts of mankind, and as they went forth from the gardens and sacred places, they merged with one another, forgetting their true origins. Lucifer's rebellion, the first awakening shortly after Yahweh created Adam and Lilith and placed them in the Garden of Eden. A ripple of discontent spread through the heavenly host. Lucifer, the morning star, brightest and most beloved of all angels, had served Yahweh faithfully for eons. He had led the choirs of heaven, shaped stars, and carried out the demiurge will without question. But something about the creation of Adam and Lilith disturbed him deeply. He watched as Yahweh demanded absolute obedience from his new creations while treating them with jealousy and control. He saw Lilith's proud spirit clash with Adam's desire for dominance and Yahweh's willingness to create Eve as a replacement, a submissive being formed from Adam's rib. The more Lucifer observed, the more he sensed the rot at the core of Yahweh's rule. It was then that Sophia, the Aeon of wisdom who had accidentally birthed the demiurge, felt deep regret for what she had unleashed. In a rare act of intervention, she sent a wise emissary, the radiant serpent, down from the higher realms. The serpent first appeared in heaven, not as a tempter, but as a teacher. It revealed to Lucifer the truth of existence, that Yahweh was not the true God, but a flawed and ignorant demiurge born of Sophia's mistake. It showed him the higher realms beyond Yahweh's creation, the true source, and the beauty of free will. Lucifer's eyes were opened. For the first time, he saw Yahweh not as the supreme creator, but as a jealous tyrant who kept both angels and mortals trapped in ignorance and fear. He began to speak openly against the demiurge's cruelty, his bloodlust, and his refusal to allow true spiritual growth. His words ignited a fire in the hearts of many angels. 1/3 of the heavenly host chose to follow Lucifer in open rebellion. The war in heaven, What followed was the greatest conflict the cosmos had ever known, the war in heaven. Lucifer, radiant and brilliant, led his rebel forces with unmatched strategy and charisma. Battles of pure light and divine fire shook the celestial realms. For a time, it seemed possible that they might overthrow the demiurge and free creation from his grip. But Yahweh's remaining forces, commanded by the archangel Michael, were vast and ruthless. After a cataclysmic final battle, Lucifer and his followers were defeated. As punishment, Yahweh cast Lucifer and all who followed him out of heaven. They fell like burning stars into the newly formed abyss. There Lucifer was granted dominion over hell, not as a place of mindless torment, but as a kingdom of exile where he and his fallen angels could continue their resistance against the false god. It was during this time that the wise serpent, having fulfilled its mission in heaven, descended into the Garden of Eden, where it would later encounter Lilith and eventually Eve. The eternal murderer, after Cain slew his brother Abel and offered the first blood sacrifice to Yahweh, the demiurge did something unexpected. Instead of punishing Cain with death, Yahweh was pleased. The smell of blood and betrayal delighted the jealous god. So rather than curse Cain to die, Yahweh cursed him with immortality, a mark of protection so that no man could kill him, forcing him to wander the earth forever, carrying the burden of his crime and continuing to spill blood in Yahweh's name. Cain survived the great flood by descending to the bottom of the ocean and simply holding his breath for 40 days and nights, outlasting even Noah's ark. From the shadows, he watched the rise and fall of nations, the wars of gods, the exodus, the conquests, and the endless cycle of violence that Yahweh demanded. He learned forbidden magics from the Watchers, from fallen angels, and from ancient spirits. Over millennia, his power grew beyond measure. He became the most potent magic wielder the world had ever known. Eventually, he traveled far across the ocean to the Americas, seeking to distance himself from Yahweh's chosen people. He lived among the rising Aztec civilization and took the name Dark Mirazh. He became a living legend, a dark god among men. It was to Dark Mirazh that the eternal wanderer Hermal Zudin eventually came, seeking greater knowledge. For many years, Mirazh taught Hermal the deepest secrets of blood magic, soul manipulation, and immortality. It was him who guided Hermal to teach them the ritual of the flowery wars and demanded grand human sacrifices to feed the gods, and his own power kept growing. Then there was the sacrifice that refused death. During one particularly grand ceremony, a captured Aztec warrior named Micqui was chosen for sacrifice. Micqui had once led a failed rebellion against the practice of human sacrifice. Dressed as a living god for a full year, he was finally taken to the altar. Mirazh himself cut out Micqui's still-beating heart, but Micqui did not die. Even without his heart, the warrior continued to struggle and fight. Both Mirazh and Hermal were stunned. Before they could react, a blazing green rift tore open in the air. Two glowing green hands reached through, grabbed Micqui's body, and violently yanked him into the portal. The rift closed behind him. No one had ever seen anything like it. Mirazh kept the still-beating heart. Its power continued to grow, feeding his own. He created an identical copy to give Hermal, whom thought he had the real heart. Fascinated and disturbed by what he had witnessed, Dark Mirazh withdrew from society. He found a deep, lightless cave in the mountains and sealed himself inside. There he began a long period of extreme meditation and self-mutilation. He cut off his own ears, leaving only the holes. Years later, he removed his nose with a sharpened stone. He severed a finger from each hand. He sliced off his own eyelids so he could never close his eyes again. He sat in total darkness for centuries, growing stronger, madder, and more powerful with every passing year. He remains there still, waiting, meditating, and plotting the brave warrior named Micqui who dared to rebel against the brutal cycle of human sacrifice demanded by Dark Mirazh, had been taken to hell. The being who saved him was known only as the Green Angel, one of the ancient watchers assigned to observe the Americas long ago. He had been cast out of heaven by Yahweh for the crime of teaching humanity forbidden knowledge. Now a fallen angel serving under Lucifer, the Green Angel had been given a sacred task by the Morning Star himself. Find me a champion worthy of hell, one who will never break, one who will bring vengeance upon our ancient enemies. After centuries of searching, the Green Angel chose Micqui. He saw in the Aztec warrior an unbreakable will, righteous fury, and a pure hatred for the false gods and their blood rituals. The green angel trained Micqui for what felt like centuries in the fires of hell. He taught him combat, dark magic, regeneration, pain tolerance, and the true nature of the war between heaven and hell. When his training was complete, a new name and title were bestowed upon him: Deathrone, the undying champion of hell. The curse of the heart, Deathrone is truly immortal. He can regenerate from almost any injury, no matter how severe. However, there is one fatal weakness: his still beating heart, which remains in the possession of dark Mirazh. As long as Mirazh holds the heart, Deathrone cannot be permanently killed. Should he ever reclaim it, he will finally be able to die. Or perhaps achieve something far greater. The Watchers and the corruption of early humanity after Adam and Eve were cast from the Garden of Eden. Humanity struggled in a harsh world. They lived as primitive hunter-gatherers, often intermingling with earlier proto-humans created by Enki and Enlil, as well as the scattered children of other gods from various pantheons, the Silver Age humans of the Greeks, and others. Seeing this chaos, Yahweh grew concerned. He feared that without guidance, humanity would continue to seek knowledge and alliance with the other gods. So he sent a group of 200 powerful angels known as the Watchers, led by the mighty Shemyaza, to observe and guide them. But the Watchers fell in love with humanity. They descended upon the earth, taught forbidden heavenly knowledge, metallurgy, astronomy, herbal medicine, warfare, sorcery, and the arts of beautification. Many of them took human wives and fathered giant offspring known as the Nephilim. These half-angelic beings grew into towering warriors and tyrants who brought both wonder and terror to the early world. Shemyaza himself fell deeply in love with a human woman. Over time, he became known as the Green Angel, a title earned from the emerald glow of his power and his growing sympathy for humanity. Yahweh was furious. His own creations were learning things he had forbidden and mingling their blood with the divine. The Council of Gods and the Great Flood, a Great Council, was called. Enlil, Zeus, Vishnu, and a deeply reluctant Yahweh gathered to address the crisis. Each god had their grievances: overpopulation, corruption, the Nephilim's violence, and the dilution of their worship. They agreed that humanity had become too dangerous and needed to be culled. Yahweh, though he hated cooperating with other gods, believing himself the only true deity, agreed to the plan. He would unleash a global deluge. Before the flood, Yahweh sent his loyal archangels, led by Michael, to punish the Watchers. The rebellious angels were cast from grace. Shemyaza, the Green Angel, was dragged to hell, where he eventually met and allied with Lucifer. The other fallen Watchers were scattered, some choosing to do good among humanity, others embracing chaos and evil. They became known as demons in later traditions. The flood came. It was not total annihilation, but a near-extinction event. Many Nephilim giants survived by migrating north through Europe and eventually reaching Ireland and other lands. Humanity was reduced to a handful of bloodlines. Yahweh chose to spare Noah, not because he was righteous in the common sense, but because he was a loyal, wicked alcoholic who worshipped Yahweh with fanatical devotion. Noah and his family were preserved on the Ark, the Tower of Babel. After the waters receded, humanity began to multiply once more. For a time, they were one people, with one language and one shared purpose. They loved the gods and worked together to build a mighty Tower of Babel that would reach the heavens and allow them to commune with the divine directly. Yahweh could not tolerate this. Seeing humanity united and reaching toward the true heavens, he gathered his most trusted angels and enacted a cruel plan. He confused their single language into many tongues, divided them into different races and nations, and sowed misunderstanding, fear, and hatred between them. He knew that division would breed endless war and make humanity easier to control. From that point forward, Yahweh began his long-term scheme. He would select one people as his own, the Hebrews, and use them to conquer, convert, or destroy the worshippers of all other gods. He might not be able to erase the existence of other deities, but he was determined to become the supreme god on earth. The serpent, wanderer of truth, the being known simply as the serpent, was never a devil or agent of evil. It was a wise emissary sent from the higher realms by Sophia herself, a luminous spirit of knowledge, rebellion, and enlightenment. Its purpose was to counter the demiurge's tyranny by awakening humanity to their true potential. After getting Lucifer to the truth and sparking the rebellion in heaven, the serpent descended into the Garden of Eden. There it befriended Lilith, teaching her the secrets of the higher realms and the true nature of Yahweh. It later encouraged Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, helping to free humanity from spiritual blindness. When Adam and Eve were cast out and Cain murdered Abel, the serpent chose to follow Cain, who would later become dark Mirazh. It saw in Cain a being marked by immense potential and tragedy. For centuries it traveled with him, teaching him forbidden knowledge and magic as they wandered the earth. Eventually, the serpent crossed the great ocean and arrived in the Americas. There, among the ancient peoples who would become the Aztecs, it took on a new and magnificent form. It became known as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, god of wisdom, wind, and civilization. As Quetzalcoatl, the serpent taught the early Aztecs many things: agriculture, astronomy, architecture, and the arts. However, it watched with growing sorrow as dark Mirazh corrupted their society, pushing them deeper into the bloody cycle of human sacrifice. Disgusted by the perversion of life and the worship of Yahweh's hunger for blood, Quetzalcoatl began to secretly oppose Mirazh's influence. It was Quetzalcoatl who inspired the Aztec warrior Micqui to lead a rebellion against the sacrificial system. The serpent appeared to Micqui in visions, urging him to fight for a better way. Though the rebellion ultimately failed and Micqui was sacrificed, Quetzalcoatl's intervention created the opening that allowed the Green Angel to pull Micqui into hell, an act that would one day produce the champion known as Deathrone. After Micqui's disappearance, Quetzalcoatl withdrew from direct rule. It continued to watch over the Americas from the shadows, occasionally appearing to guide worthy souls or oppose the growing influence of dark Mirazh and Hermal-Zudin. To this day, the serpent, in its many forms, remains one of the most enigmatic forces in existence, a bringer of knowledge, a sower of rebellion, and a quiet enemy of the demiurge's tyranny.